Welcome to the Hoop Collective Podcast. We talk about the NBA. Happy New Year to everybody. We're recording this in advance, so we have no idea what's happening in the world, but hopefully we're in a simpler time now than when this comes out. Okay, today we've got Tim Bontemps joining us from San Jose, California.
Hello, everybody.
And from Dallas, Texas, we've got Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. When this comes out, I'll be in Oklahoma City.
And I will be in San Francisco, where guess who will be playing? The Warriors, obviously, and Cavs Corner.
Ooh.
Cavs Corner.
Woo. I'll see them right after that when they come through Dallas. Ooh, we're going to be all over Cavs Corner in the new year.
Seeing a lot more than the pom-pom waving Cavs guy on the pod.
Oh, I have not been to a Cavs. I went to their training camp, but I have not been to a Cavs game this year. So this is LeBron James' 40th birthday. And obviously there's been many things done on his birthday over the years. He's really good. He was good at age 20. He's good at age 40. But Bontemps, you did something pretty inventive. You went and looked at the best players at every age currently. You ranked them. Jonathan Givony, who's our draft analyst, the best in the business, consulted on these pre-NBA guys. But we're going to look at everybody from their current age 17 to age 40. Spoiler alert, LeBron's going to be the 40-year-old winner. And take a look at who you think you and Givony, but you think is the best player at every age in the NBA. It's a great topic, and it actually, when you look at the list, it kind of puts in perspective. When you look at the ages of these guys and the guys you considered, it kind of puts a lot of things in perspective. So, but a very good story that you can read on ESPN.com. And so we are going to start with the 17-year-old Bontemps. You went, or I should say Givony went with Cameron Boozer, who is committed to play at Duke next year. And what makes me feel very, very old, because I remember when Cameron was born. I was covering Boozer at the time. And
did you start Carlos's rookie year with the Cavs, Brian? Or was he the year before?
His second year.
You also remember when Bronny was born.
Very well.
Oh, what are we doing? Well.
Yes, very well. But you also considered AJ Debinsa, who's committed to BYU. What do you know about these guys, Bontemps?
Well, I was a little surprised because I asked Jonathan obviously Jonathan, like you said, is our draft guru. So I said, hey, listen, I can handle everything NBA-wise, but for pre-draft stuff, should I default to your rankings or how should I handle it? And I was a little surprised that he picked Cameron Boozer over AJ Debinsa, who is going to BYU. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of attention on him. He's a really talented wing player. Cameron, though, his brother, I'm trying to think of his brother's name right now. I should have looked it up. But the two twin brothers are both going to Duke, and both are big-time prospects. And, again, 6'9", forward, can do a lot of stuff with the ball. Not shockingly, Caden. Thank you, Jackson. Caden is the other brother's name. Not shockingly for anybody who watched his dad play, he's also a big-time rebounder. And, all super talented players. I'm not going to try to sit here and be Jonathan and say that, what they're going to look like 5 years from now when they're playing in the NBA, all but certainly. But, given the amount of attention that's been on AJ recently, I thought he'd be first, but Jonathan went the other way.
Yeah, so AJ Debinsa, he's committed to BYU. He's going to prep school in Utah. I'm not really sure what the name of the school is. I just don't know off the top of my head. The interesting thing is that he's getting pretty much a record NIL deal going to BYU. And a lot of BYU's NIL is being funded by their wealthiest, if not their wealthiest, their most high-profile, wealthiest alum, Ryan Smith, who, of course, owns the Jazz and the Utah Hockey Club. And so the fascinating thing here is when you talk to folks with the Jazz, obviously the Jazz are clearly tanking this year in the concept for chasing the 18-year-olds, which we're going to talk about in a second. But the question is, if the Jazz get unlucky and they don't get one of the top 3 picks, are they going to also tank next year because AJ Debinsa is, pretty much Utah's own and certainly Ryan Smith's own.
Well, I
And
mean, you
so,
call it tanking. The simple fact is they can try as hard as they possibly can. They're not good. They're not going to win a lot of games. It's not like, they're just
well, true, but they're going to have a bunch of cap space, and they have a ton of draft assets, and if
They
they
could
win
speed things up if they want to, is the point.
yes,
and they're probably not going to want to.
There's certainly an understanding within the organization that they need a young foundation piece to build around, and I think that will guide their decision making.
I'm just going to say that the concept that Cooper Flagg, who we'll talk about in a second here, is the prize of the eye of Utah, may not be the full 360-degree view. On the 18-year-old, we've given it away. You have Cooper Flagg here. It's interesting, though, because Gavoni has written and said recently that he doesn't think Cooper Flagg is an absolute ironclad slam dunk, even though we've been talking about him for years. I know you've researched him a lot, Bontemps. I haven't watched him play a lot. I know you were there when he was having a real kind of impact performance at the Team USA training camp last summer. But Gavoni doesn't ironclad have him at number one. This is not like it was with Victor Wembanyama when he was clearly the standout player in that class.
Well, this is also a generational potentially draft class, and part of the reason that he's the number one pick right now, but might not necessarily be, is because of the two guys who are coming after him in the 18-year-old class, the second and third ranked players by Jonathan in this year's draft class, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, both of whom are going to Rutgers. Dylan Harper, the son of Ron Harper, a big physical lead guard, shockingly, given his dad was a very long time great NBA player who was a big physical lead guard. And Ace Bailey played with Cooper and Montverde last year and is a prototypical wing, like super big, 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", long arms, super athletic. Like, had an NBA GM tell me recently that he's the kind of guy that you got to project out a little bit, but if it clicks, I mean, you're talking about everything you would want in a wing player, which, as we know, is the premium position to fill in the league today. So, yeah, I mean, this draft is much different than last year's draft, which we'll also get into when we get into the 19-year-olds. But yeah, I mean, Cooper's a big time player. So were these other guys, and it's going to be an interesting 18 months or so to see how the college year goes and how the rookie
let
year
me just
goes
tell you how different it is, because so we've just mentioned three guys who are going to be in the 2025 draft, and the best 19-year-old, according to Gavoni, is not the two 19-year-olds who were taken at first and second in this last year's draft, Zachary Richichet and Alex Sarr.
Can I set this up a little bit?
Yeah.
So for the 19-year-old group, there, as you said, there's Zachary Richichet, who's the number one pick. There's Alex Sarr. There's a bunch of guys in this year's draft you could pick from. So I said to Jonathan, should I take your top-ranked 19-year-old in this year's draft, or should I take one of the NBA guys? And he said I should take his top-ranked 19-year-old, who is BJ Edgecombe, who's a forward for Baylor.
Yeah, and by the way, who we've seen play against grown man competition. Bahamas almost made the Olympics. They got to the finals of their qualifier, and on a team that had Buddy Hield, Eric Gordon, DeAndre Ayton, you could make an argument that he was their best player in the Olympic qualifying tournament.
He was extremely exciting in that event, and that's why I'm sure Jonathan has a number one. He isn't, and there's going to be games between when we record this and when this publishes, so I don't want to, he isn't like dominating at Baylor. His numbers are fine, but he's not like, blowing people away. But the way he played in those qualifying events certainly was exciting. 6'5" guard. VJ Edgecombe.
Yeah, and he's another big physical, super athletic wing, another very high pick in this year's draft. One of the guys at the top that if, one of these teams lands in the top 4 or 5 in the draft, they're going to be thrilled to get him, and would have been all but certainly the number one pick in last year's draft.
Also the kind of guy who's, I think, his game's much better suited to the wide open NBA style than the clunky college style.
Yes.
So the 20-year-olds is a no-brainer for you, Bontemps. You picked Victor Wembanyama.
Yes, not a lot of thought there.
I do think I want to talk about the two guys that you are also considering, because it brings up something I want to talk about. But to talk about who you had sort of second and third there.
Yeah, so some of these years there were a variety of guys you could pick from. So just to rip through some of the guys, or I had listed, Bilal Koulibaly with the Wizards, another French guy who played with Victor, obviously in France, and Derek Lively, who we're obviously very familiar with. But some of the other 20-year-olds you could pick from are Jared McCain, who just got hurt but has been very good early on with Philly, Stephon Castle, Scoot Henderson, Yves Missi, Bird, who obviously was people thought more pick in the draft this year. Those are some of the guys you could have picked from, but I went with Koulibaly and Lively.
Let me ask you why you went with Koulibaly, because I was just talking to a scout that I really trust the other day, and he was saying, because Wizards are just having a miserable year, but he was saying to me that Koulibaly is starting to show some things. Like, he is starting to show promise. If you're looking for something as a Wizards fan, Koulibaly is beginning to really impress some people. So the fact that you had him in here, I think is interesting.
Yeah, he's just a super toolsy athletic wing, right? Again, like if he hits, you saw it when he was playing with Victor for Metropolitans 92 in the playoffs. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, who's this super long, athletic 17-year-old that's flying in and dunking on people in these games? Like I said, you could easily argue for
I
any of these
understand.
other guys, but
I understand. I'm backing you up here, is what I'm doing.
And he's the perfect player for the Lizards right now, because he's not ready to help you win games, but he can develop into a full-blown dude.
By the way, he barely played for the French national team in the Olympics, and that's not. I mean, what I'm saying is, like, he wasn't like showing that he was about to take a leap, but he might be taking a mini leap here this season. Okay, the 21-year-olds. You selected Dyson Daniels. You had some other interesting choices. Why don't you go with that one, Bontemps?
yeah, so this is you're going to see some of these years there's incredibly hard choices because there's super high level candidates, and there's incredibly hard choices other years because it's very hard to pick between sort of an interesting group of guys. And this was one of those years because, like, I'm just going to read through a bunch of the 21-year-olds that are on the list: Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Sohan, Dyson Daniels, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Jalen Duren, Brandon Pajemski, Cason Wallace, Grady Dick. Like, all these guys are interesting players for different reasons, but I'm not 100% sure any of them are going to ever make an all-star team. And so it made for a hard choice, but I ultimately went Dyson because we've obviously talked about him a ton. He's been one of the best perimeter defenders in the league this year. Obviously, his shot is still a work in progress, but he's been a very significant part of a pretty good season for Atlanta so far. I can see MacMahon's face. He's the biggest Amen Thompson fan on the planet. I assume he's going to say him, but Dyson, I just think at this moment in time is doing a lot of the things Amen is doing in a bigger role, which is not really Amen's fault, but he's playing, whatever, 20 some minutes a game in Houston. So ultimately I went with him, but all these guys are good players who I think are, interesting pieces in a variety of ways, but I didn't feel super strongly ultimately about how it went.
No, I think the Daniels, conversation, they're very comparable players. They are both elite defenders already, like some of the best defenders in the league. Neither one of them have a jump shot to speak of. I think Daniels is playing in a bigger role now. He's certainly helped the Hawks as their starter, where Thompson's coming off the bench. I think the difference is, I think there's more versatility in Thompson's offensive game. He's not a shooter, but he is a guy who can really thrive as a ball handler. In transition, he's an absolute beast, and he can play the five for you offensively, and really excel in that rim running role. When they went on that 11-game win streak last year, most of which was without Şengün, he was basically playing center for them offensively and playing extremely well in that role. So I think he's got a little bit more offensive versatility, although they both have the same clear, obvious offensive flaw.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about
two
guys on this list here. So Dyson Daniels, I think, he's a potential all defensive player this year. And so I've been talking about him for weeks. We've been talking about him a lot.
Yeah, another discovery for you.
Yeah, no one had ever heard of him before. Podziemski is having a bit of a sophomore slump.
I mean, a bit is a wild understatement. I picked him because he had a tremendous year last year and was, I think, by far the best of these guys a year ago. And so I factored that in.
19 points a game. He's volume scoring. The team has had a bunch of injuries and they're tanking. But like Grady Dick is averaging 10 more points a game than he did last year. His shooting percentages aren't that great. But I don't know what to say about him. Like, he's a guy who was not even a consideration for their all rookie teams last year, who this year is having one of the best sophomore seasons. So you mentioned him. Like, is Grady Dick just taking advantage of volume scoring on a bad team, or is this a guy who's making a little bit of a move?
No, I think he's definitely gotten better. And he's a big 6'6" guard who can really shoot it. I think you can make an argument for Shaedon Sharpe too, another guy who's a super toolsy wing who, like, again, if you told me a couple years from now he's blown up, like, I could see that too. Like, and I also do think, because we didn't even really talk about him in the 25 under 25. I do think because of the way Houston's team is set up that I think Jabari Smith is pretty underrated.
I
Like,
agree.
he can do a lot of stuff really well. And he as a 6'10" forward who can play the 4 and the 5, who can space the floor, handle it a little bit. Again, he might not ever be a superstar.
And wants to defend. Like really is engaged in it.
He just feels like a guy who's going to be part of winning teams for a long time.
Yeah, he's a good role player already, and he's got a chance to be like an extremely high level role player. I don't know that he's going to ever be an all-star, but I think he's going to be a good player on good teams for a long time. One guy you didn't mention who is kind of in that he's smaller than these guys, but he's in the Daniels Thompson conversation in terms of defensive impact is Cason Wallace.
Yeah,
Cason Wallace is, I mean, he is an elite perimeter defender who his hands are unbelievable. He's having a terrible shooting season. He shot it well as a rookie. It's been rough this year, but Oklahoma City is awfully happy that he's on their roster.
Okay, so you mentioned a minute ago Jabari Smith. You remember a couple years ago, that draft day, that Jabari Smith was going into the day considered the guy who was going to go number 1 to the Magic. And I ended up doing a story on this, talking to people in Orlando and talking to all the agents and talking to the other teams, trying to determine whether or not the Magic were making some sort of play here, some sort of trickeration. Everybody swore not. Maybe they did, because at the end of the day, I mean, the way the story was told to me, they didn't truly make up their mind until like very late the night before. And then on draft day, they still could have changed their mind. And it was still going back and forth between Jabari Smith and the guy who they did take, who is your number 1, age 22, Paolo Banchero. Regardless, I think the Magic made an intelligent pick. Bontemps, you have Paolo Banchero as the best number 22-year-old in this age group. Has a lot of contenders.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was saying before, right? Like, you go year to year, it shows you sort of the strength of these groups. And you look at this one, like, I mean, Paolo, I might have picked Chet Holmgren if he was healthy. Obviously, with him, with the second significant injury, I demerited him a little bit, but he's obviously terrific. Perrin Sengun, who is the other, also considered guy, has had a tremendous start to his career in Houston. You've got Brandon Miller, who had a very nice rookie year last year for Charlotte.
Yeah.
Ben Mathurin, who's coming on
Brandon
this
Miller
year.
in other age groups would definitely be in the top 3. But even if he was he's in a tough class here.
For sure. Like, he had a very nice rookie year. Jaden Ivey has come on this year. Ben Mathurin has come on this year. This is one of the deeper groups for sure.
What about your guy, Josh Giddey?
He did not get considered.
All right. Age 23, a pretty clear-cut number 1, but these are guys who have signed some max contracts. All these guys you're about to mention are guys who have signed max contracts, but maybe a list that was altered by the way some of this season has gone, Bontemps.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Edwards, pretty clear number 1 pick. based off how he went last year. Also was the number one pick in the draft with many of these guys. But, you know, some of the names in this group: LaMelo Ball, Franz Wagner, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Williams, Scotty Barnes, Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs, Tari Eason, Walker Kessler. I'm just going through the guys. Jaime Jaquez. There's obviously a ton of really interesting guys in this age 23 group. And, I'll probably narrow it down to two of them to be the second and third guys eventually by the time the story runs. But a lot of them would be the number one guy in a couple of these different groups if, they were a year or two younger, because it's a very loaded group going forward.
So Ant clearly is number one in this group. Who, narrowing it down to two of them, second and third. Okay, right. You've got Franz, LaMelo, Scotty Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have Jalen Williams written in there. I just wrote some also considered. I mean, Jalen Williams and Evan Mobley and Cade. I mean, I don't know. I'm really not sure as of right now. I mean, I'd probably say Jalen Williams and either Franz or Mobley, probably as of right now.
Well, and people are going to be mad you're leaving LaMelo out. LaMelo's out.
Well, let's talk about LaMelo. How are we evaluating LaMelo right now?
Dude,
so obviously
the same way we evaluated him this summer, an empty stats guy.
Well, that's the thing. He's averaging 30 points a game.
You want to know what his usage rate is? 38%.
Dude, he just again.
But it's not winning basketball, guys, and he's fouling like a maniac.
He just had a game where he scored, what did he have, 34 last night we're 34 on whatever the date is. We're screwing up because
it's a while ago by now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The game
Merry
he had
Christmas.
against the Wizards, who got their W back against the Sharks.
They lost to the Wizards, and this was LaMelo's stat line. 34 minutes, 34 points, 13 assists, and 1 turnover, while shooting 11 for 32 from the field.
Ooh.
And 3 for 18 from 3, while going 9 for 10 from the line with 4 rebounds and 4 steals, and was +3 in 34 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just very hard to square any of that.
Yeah. I mean,
like 13 to 1 assist to turnover is great. +3 is great. 11 for 32, very much not great. 3 for 18, very much not great. 9 for 10 from the free throw line, pretty good. Like
maybe LaMelo matures and proves that he can be the leader of a winning team. Maybe it's a change of scenery and that happens. I'm skeptical.
It's just hard to know because
let me ask you this.
He made the All-Star team as a 20-year-old in his second year in the league and deserved to make it.
Yeah.
He basically has been hurt since, and now he's playing on a team that is not good and is trying to position itself to get another high pick in next year's draft.
So yeah, he won Rookie of the Year, and then his second year he made the All-Star team. He's actually averaging 50% more points per game. His scoring percentage is up 50% since he made the All-Star team. And let me ask you this: is 34%? Is somebody who's shooting 34%? Should they be taking 13 threes a game?
No, but because he's shooting 34%, because so many of the threes he takes are ridiculous shots.
That's what I mean.
Off dribble, blindfolded with, while he's doing a selfie on Instagram. Like, what are we doing?
Here's what I think the most important stat is for LaMelo Ball. 20 games played. Last year, he played 22 games, and this is 20 games as of December 20th.
We're just before Christmas here.
So by the time this pod runs, knock on wood, he will have already played more games than he played all of last year. And a year before that, he played 36.
Right.
So if he is healthy this entire year and on the court and plays 70-ish games, that is a very good step forward for him and for Charlotte. And then we'll see where things sit next year when they have Brandon Miller in his third year, when they have Mark Williams hopefully on the court for an extended period of time, who's basically missed all the last year with injuries. They have another high pick in this year's draft. Maybe they add a Cooper Flagg. Maybe they add a VJ Edgecombe. Maybe they add a Dylan Harper or a Ace Bailey in the draft. And then we'll see where it's at. But I think for now, we just need to see LaMelo on the court and playing on a consistent basis. But I think he's a hard guy to square, because I don't think your opinion is necessarily wrong, MacMahon, about him. But he's also never been in a situation where they've had a real serious winning team or attempt to have a winning team around
Well,
him.
Scotty Barnes he made the All-Star team last year. His season's been derailed by injuries so far. Evan Mobley has a decent chance of making the All-Star team this year. We'll see. The way the Cavs are playing, there's a good chance they get 2 All-Stars, and Donovan Mitchell is obviously going to make it. We'll see. Franz Wagner was going to be an All-Star, but he's been hurt, and so now won't make the team.
Right. Jalen Williams has had a terrific year. Well, obviously, we've talked a ton about him with the Thunder. Jalen Suggs has come on. He just signed a huge contract. Like, this is one of those years where, like, there's 10 guys that are awfully good, and it's going to be incredibly hard to choose between them.
Age 24, you've got Tyrese Haliburton here, and this is an interesting one. Talk about this age group.
This is one for the opposite reason. Like, it's very hard to choose. Like, again, here are some of the guys to pick from. Tyrese Haliburton, as you said, was my number one guy, despite his issues over the 24 season or the calendar year 2024. You've got Tyrese Maxey, Tyler Hero, Darius Garland, Trey Murphy, Kobe White, RJ Barrett, all pretty good players. And then you have the guy that was supposed to be the guy in this age group, Zion Williamson, who has just not been able to stay on the court, obviously. So, it's a hard one to square.
And with Zion, he hasn't been able to stay on the court, and he hasn't developed at all since the day that he stepped foot in the NBA. So there's two major concerns there.
You compared him to Ben Simmons before in that sense, and I think it's an accurate comparison from the standpoint that they both came in with incredible physical gifts, and several years into their career have, had moments of, real achievement, made all-star teams, done stuff, but there hasn't been real growth in their games. And now, obviously on top of that, he's really struggled to stay on the court.
Do you remember when Zion's first ever game, he made like 3 threes in the first 5 minutes on the court or something like that? His rookie year, he actually shot 43% on threes. And not that I'm arguing for him to be a 3-point shooter, but typically what you often see with all players, especially players who play multi-position like Zion can, you see them get better at shooting. His shooting percentages have been going down, even though he's one of the great.
He was 6 for 14 from 3 in 24 games.
I understand.
So not exactly a huge sample.
I understand, but
and it's not just the 3.
Overall, his percentages have gone down. By the way, his second year he shot 61% from the field, and this year he's been in the 40s with the games that he's played.
And I was talking to somebody in New Orleans when I went through there recently, and the way they put it is there is no craft in his game. There's been no development of that. Like, there's no footwork. There's no, just like you look at guys like Luka and Shai, and these guys that are like the elite scorers, dude, they are so crafty. They don't have his raw athleticism, but they are better, when they're not able to get all the way to the hole than he is, because they're so quick. And Zion has natural touch around the basket, but do you ever see him make a beautiful footwork play or like a pump fake and step? There's none of that stuff with him.
Yeah, it's obviously not gone great. Darius Garland was an All-Star 2 years ago. He is having an excellent year as well, who's on this list. And Maxey, a little bit of derail with injury, but Maxey is, very strong as well. Okay, age 25. This is a no-brainer at number 1, but you also have some other guys. This is sort of entering your prime zone here. And here's a guy who's prime.
Yeah, this is the simplest one of the whole list. Luka obviously is the 25-year-old, and John Morant and Jaren Jackson are the only guys that were even in the same zip code. So I think we can move along pretty quick on that one.
All right, age 26. We got some studs here, and not that hard of a choice, but a bit of a choice at number 1.
There were 3.
Bagley doesn't get in the 25 conversation.
No, there were 3 players, 3 ages where the choice was extraordinarily hard. This was one of them, between Shai and Jason Tatum. I went with Shai. If you want to argue Jason Tatum, I think you have an argument. I would pick Shai, but obviously Tatum's great. Shai is great. Some of the other guys, I have De'Aaron Fox listed. Trae Young is in this group. Desmond Bane, a few other guys, but the main
De'Aaron
ones are
You have De'Aaron
Fox and
Fox.
No, but SGA and Tatum are the two guys who are all NBA first team players. Look, Shea was second in MVP voting last year. Tatum, what did Tatum end up last year in MVP voting? Point is,
Fourth.
I think he was fourth,
Fifth. Yeah.
right.
fourth or fifth. Yeah.
Point is, Shea has a real chance of winning an MVP. Tatum is in that second tier, and he's going to be on ballots. He deserves to be on ballots, but he's there. There's not a real chance that he's going to win the MVP, and there is with Shea.
Is Tatum's a better defender?
Well, I think
they're similar. I think they're similar defenders.
Well, Shea got 2 votes for Defensive Player of the Year.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well,
listen,
yes, you've made that point many times. I think they're
right.
both
I've gotten
excellent.
chastised by Canadians for going too often. Shea is a part of the number 1 defense in the league by a wide margin. Shea is a big time defensive playmaker, in terms of steals and blocks, who takes usually the easiest defensive assignment on the floor.
Yeah, they're both excellent team defenders.
The lift for Tatum defensively is bigger than the lift for Shea, but the lift for Shea.
I think the lift for both of them is fairly similar. They're both on awesome defensive teams. I think the fact that Tatum is a bigger player, I think the fact that he is also a good defensive player gives him a bit of a nod there. But I think they're similar. They're similar guys at both ends of the court. I just think Shea's a little bit ahead.
The lift for Shea is bigger on offense. The lift for Tatum is bigger on defense.
Now, I will say this. Shea, for a guard, is an elite shot blocker. Like
he gets steals. He gets steals and blocks.
Yeah, he creates a ton of
blocks that he gets. Like Shea, I've seen him on multiple occasions. Like there was one when they were playing the Mavericks where I think it was Luka who threw the lob, but a lob was thrown to Derek Lively, who obviously is a phenomenally athletic 7-foot finisher. And he came over and broke that thing up at like the peak of the jump. I mean, he makes some unbelievable plays as a help defender. And then, generates a lot of steals. And those are a huge part of OKC's success, not only getting stops, but getting out in transition. I think Shea's a more impactful defender.
Okay. All right. 27-year-olds. You went with Bam Adebayo.
Well, hold on. This one, there's a bit of a tweak. So part of the reason where I paused as I was going through the 26-year-olds is when I went to the filter on NBA.com that I was using, I saw De'Aaron Fox wasn't listed among the 26-year-olds. And I said, wait a second, what happened with De'Aaron Fox? Turns out we're doing this podcast on De'Aaron Fox's birthday. So De'Aaron Fox just turned 27. So let me give you the list of guys at 27, which now includes De'Aaron Fox, because I this was one of the harder ones for me to decide who to pick. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox is one of them. You mentioned Bam Adebayo. I went with him. You've got Lauri Markkanen, OG Anunoby, Ivica Zubac, Jamal Murray, Brandon Ingram.
Congrats to Ivica Zubac for being mentioned alongside these dudes.
I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league.
Well, fair enough.
Jamal Murray being only 27, kind of, wow. Why does he feel like he's 32?
Because he
came in the league
that way.
super, super young too. He's been around a very long time. So who would you guys pick at 27? Would you pick Bam or would you switch to potentially De'Aaron Fox?
Well, Bam Adebayo has been a key member of 2 teams that have gone to the finals.
And also was a key member of Team USA winning the gold medal again this year. I think I would stick with Bam, but De'Aaron being in there, I would have him second on the list. So I didn't know if either of you would go that way.
I would agree with that. And Bam's offensive numbers are pretty significantly down this season.
He's had a rough offensive season.
But he's an awesome defensive player. He's a very good offensive player. He obviously, like, you're not running, like, he can't be your best offensive player and you be any good. I just think Bam is more impactful and more accomplished.
Yeah, that would be my lean too. But De'Aaron becoming 27 today threw me a bit of a curveball. So
all right, maybe there'll be an edit.
Well, he will be in the 27 group, but I'm going to stick with Bam for all the reasons MacMahon just said.
The 28 group, I think, had to be your hardest. I don't even know.
Second, there's 2 that were the hardest. One is going to come much later on the list, and this one I think is just about impossible to pick from. So let me, just for the listeners, I'll read through the top 5 guys I think that you could pick from in this group. Devin Booker, Jalen Brunson, Jaylen Brown, Donovan Mitchell, and I will throw in Domantas Sabonis and Mikal Bridges, all of whom are in this age 26 class and
Age 28.
or 28 class, I should say. And
Sabonis is another guy I thought, feels like he's older than that. And another guy who's
yes,
been in the league since he was a teenager.
yes, but I mean, good luck picking between those top 4 guys: Booker, Brunson, Jaylen Brown, and Donovan Mitchell. I
Yeah.
mean, you could make an argument for any one of them.
Yeah, and none of them. Jaylen Brown is the most team accomplished, but his statistically, he's the lesser of the compared to these other guys. I mean,
Yeah, I
Jaylen
mean, I
Brown's got
think
a Finals MVP.
he's 4th on the list, but again, we're
Yeah.
talking about the guy who was conference finals and finals MVP for the best team in the league last year. So
I mean,
Wow.
I think Devin Booker has had the best overall career. I think Donovan Mitchell is having the best season, and I think Jalen Brunson had the best season last year. But that season, as
I
you
would
mentioned,
agree
with Jalen Brown holding the Finals MVP
I
trophy
would agree with
after
all
a
of that.
conference Finals MVP trophy.
So I will say, amongst these guys, I think I've only put one of them on the MVP ballot, which is top 5, and that was Jalen Brunson. So, but certainly you look at these resumes, and it's, we could debate it for an hour, and we're not gonna. All right,
yeah, I ended up. We never actually said what I'm
Well,
doing.
you have 2 names here, so I'm not sure what you did.
Well,
Go with.
I'm just gonna pick now. I'm gonna go with Jalen Brunson. Donovan Mitchell is having a fantastic year also, and obviously his team is playing great. Brunson's numbers are better than him by a little bit across the board. He's shooting better, more efficiently. He's scoring more points. He's dishing more assists. He obviously has a bigger playmaking role on that team because the Cavs have Darius Garland and some of these other guys. But you
Where
could
do
pick
you
any one of those dudes.
Where do you live?
I live in New York City.
Oh, a little
East
homer
Coast
action.
bias. I will
Hey,
say
who
this:
does he hate the most? Cavs corner.
whenever I have a challenge in deciding on something like this, the thing I always go to, I said it earlier, is what is their nightly lift? What are they asked to do for their team every night? And Jalen's lift is enormous, not just from the minutes he plays, but what they need him to do is enormous. And I do think that factors in a little bit. I mean, Donovan's is pretty high too, but Donovan's team is,
Well, Donovan's is not as high this season, which is
that's true.
And that's not like to his credit. He has not been ball hoggy and shared the wealth. Last year, Donovan's lift was, I would say, just as high.
Yeah,
It's not as high this
his usage rate is slightly higher than Jalen's, but if you obviously anybody who's watched the Knicks, he's the main offensive distributor on their team.
Yeah, I mean, teams know that you can. Their game plans are. They know his workload is so high that they try to wear him down from the first quarter on.
Right.
Okay, age 29. This was there's some dudes in this class, but there's one that stands above the rest.
Yeah. Pretty safe to say, guy who just was named top the straw poll, Nikola Jokic, averaging a cool 31, 13, and 9.8 assists as we're recording the pod. He was a pretty easy choice for first, and pretty easy choices for second and third on the list in Cat, who just had a triumphant return to Minnesota, and Kristaps Porzingis, who has really revitalized his career, had a really good year in Washington, and then obviously gets traded to Boston and leads them to helps lead them to the title last year.
Hey, Zach LaVine revitalizing his career, averaging a super efficient 22 points per game. Can the Bulls move him? Can they get value for him? I'm just saying.
I don't think so to any of those categories, but we will see.
I do think he's averaging an efficient 22 points per game.
Well, I meant has he revitalized his career? I would say no, and I don't think he's getting traded, but we will see.
All right, age 30, we got some MVPs in here.
Yes, this one, again, very easy choice at the top in Giannis Antetokounmpo, who finished third in the straw poll, having a tremendous year also. After that, Joel Embiid, obviously, I think would be one of the also considered in any situation. He has been in and out of the lineup, obviously, with injuries, but some other guys here. Derek White was the other guy I picked third, kind of a remarkable ascension for him over the past few years.
I-
Now shooting, I think 45% from
There's
three
a
on
guy
high
who's
volume.
older than I thought he would be. You talked about like
Have you
Sabonis
seen the
feeling
man's
younger.
hair?
Well,
Well, now it's gone.
yeah. Well, maybe that's what happened. He hit 30 and he had to shave it off.
And then some of the other guys here, Julius Randle, Pascal Siakam, Jeremy Grant, Fred VanVleet. You know, another guy who has been around forever, Clint Capella, would not have guessed Clint was 30.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
Alex Caruso,
if I had said to you
another very
before
good
the
player,
started,
30.
who's older, Clint Capella or Derek White, nobody would have said that they were the same age. So,
Right.
Okay, age
I mean,
31.
listen, Embiid, Giannis was a conversation a couple of years ago. Embiid, a healthy Embiid versus Giannis might be a conversation, but that's never happened.
Yeah, it was a conversation of the last few years was, you know, in different orders, Jokic,
listen,
Embiid, and Giannis. And
2
at this
years
point,
ago-
it's pretty clearly, you know, Embiid is third on that list.
2 years ago, when Embiid won the MVP, Giannis had a great season. He missed some time with injuries. In fact, I don't think he even played the 65, but the 65 wasn't a rule then. He at that time, he arguably had his best season, and Embiid beat him out. So just FYI. Okay, 31-year-olds.
Yeah, this was another easy one. Anthony Davis at the top of the list. And then some of the other guys who were considered: Bradley Beal, Norm Powell, and then it sort of fell off from there, I would say. Dennis Schroeder, Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith, former pod guest Larry Nance Jr. But to show you sort of how this goes, there's only about 20 guys that age in the league.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
19 guys, including another former podcast, George Niang. We're popular with the 31-year-olds, but
How could you not pick George Niang over Anthony Davis?
I know, but the fact that there's only 19, I mean, 31's, you don't think a 31 is that old?
That should be your prime, right? Isn't
There's not, and there's not that many guys.
All right, 32-year-olds. You've got a stud at the top here.
Yeah, this is another one where, you know, Kyrie Irving having a tremendous year with the Mavericks, pretty easy choice. This also fell off pretty quick after that. Rudy Gobert was the pretty clear second one. And then, you know, you're talking about Buddy Hield, who I picked, Tobias Harris, another pod guest, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Jordan Clarkson, Malcolm Brogdon, Harrison Barnes, Tim Hardaway Jr. A lot of guys who've been around MacMahon over time.
Did you mention TJ McConnell?
Didn't mention TJ McConnell.
Yeah. So
there's Omaha's own Doug McDermott back in the league this year.
Valanciunas. There's some quality players.
He never left the league, my man.
Like Kyrie.
He got back in the league.
Yeah. Kyrie's playing at an all NBA level. Gobert just won his 4th defense player of the year. This has not been a great season by his standards so far. And like you said, at the top of it, this one's not tough.
All right, so it's interesting. Age 33 and 34. 33, the pickings are slim. 34, the pickings are not slim.
Yes. So, there are 7 players in the NBA who are 33. The guy I picked, Khris Middleton, who didn't play until about a week ago after having bilateral ankle surgery. CJ McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, who's played a handful of games.
Right.
Alec Burks, Tristan Thompson, Dwight Powell, and Corey Joseph. First of all,
Tristan feels like he's 39 to me.
There's more Canadians than Americans at 33 playing in the NBA, which is quite a stat. And Tristan, another guy who has been around forever.
I thought Tristan was going to retire. He's only 33. He's got more.
He did retire. He was working next to you.
I know. I didn't realize he was like 28 when that.
But I went with Middleton because I think he's the best player of that group. But again, this is another one where it's not.
But the 34-year-old group.
Yes, the 34-year-old group where there are
now
more
we
of
got
them
some
in the
Hall
league.
of Famers.
Hold on, I got to give a shout out to Dwight Powell. 33-year-old Dwight Powell. They call it the Dwight Powell trade, not the Rajon Rondo trade.
Another Canadian.
Listen, in Basketball Reference, you know, when you go to a team page and it shows the all-time top 12 players from each franchise, it's based on win shares.
Is Dwight Powell in the top 12 for the Mavs?
Brother, on win shares. Again, in win shares, it's a stat that, like, a lob-catching big man does well in that stat.
Yeah.
Dwight Powell is right between Mark Aguirre and Steve Nash on all-time win shares.
That is amazing.
He's 9th.
That is an indictment of the entire statistic.
Yeah.
Well, it's an indictment of the vast history of the Mavs franchise, frankly.
He's ahead of Jason Kidd and Steve Nash on all-time win shares for the Mavericks.
That is crazy.
Luka's
is
got him.
totally
Wow.
Luka's
crazy.
got him by a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit. So yes, as you mentioned, Brian, I would say there's at least five, well, not at least. There are five guys who are going to make the Hall of Fame from this age 34 group. The guy I picked, Damian Lillard, just coming off winning the NBA Cup with the Bucks. Paul George, Klay Thompson, Drew Holiday, Draymond Green, and that doesn't even include Nick Vucevic, who's having the best shooting season of his career. And then there's five other guys who are that age: Torrey Craig, Seth Curry, Reggie Jackson, Mason Plumlee, and Jay Crowder in the league. But those top five
I don't
guys
think
in
Jay
particular,
Crowder's in the
Wait,
league
did
anymore.
you mention Klay Thompson?
I believe he
He
just
did.
re-signed with Sacramento.
Oh, he
I think
did.
he's with the Kings.
I missed that.
He's on NBA.com's list here, but maybe he's back out again. But regardless, yes, I did say Klay. Dame, PG, Klay, Drew, and Draymond Green. Pretty good quintet of guys at 34 to pick from. But I went with Dame. I think he's playing at the highest level of those guys right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I'd say that that Drew would be the other one.
Jay Crowder is playing. I just was totally unaware of it. My fault.
Yeah, no, he came
Yeah.
back with sack. Drew Holiday's, I mean, he's
had a bit of a down offensive year, but if you
Yeah.
saw him, as you know, when you saw him play in the playoffs,
yeah.
he still is making massive impacts on winning on a nightly basis, obviously.
Yeah. And Draymond, heck of a performance against the Grizzlies with a quadruple donut, minus 42.
That game was literally weeks ago now.
I know, but it's seared into my mind, Wendy.
Okay. All right, 35-year-olds. Pickings are
This
slim,
one-
but decent names.
The list was very simple. There are five players at 35 in the league. Eric Gordon and Markieff Morris did not make the cut for the final
Oh.
three. And then DeMar DeRozan,
Former
James
podcast
Harden.
guest.
Yes, DeMar DeRozan, James Harden, and Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler first.
Hey, James Harden and Jimmy Butler haven't been guests, but boy, have they provided us some content.
Just a little. Just a little.
Come on, Jimmy. That would be interesting. wouldn't it?
Oh, man. What color would his hair be?
Oh my God. All right, age 36.
This was the single hardest choice on the list.
What are
and
you
I
going to
still
do
haven't
here,
made it.
buddy?
I
What are
still
you gonna
haven't
do?
made it. So Brook Lopez is third. There's eight guys. Brook Lopez was third. Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love, Nick Batum, Patty Mills, DeAndre Jordan. Favorite podcast topic, DeAndre Jordan.
And Bob
still in the
Pettit.
league at 36.
Happy
and then the two
92nd to Bob Pettit recently,
Yes,
by the
happy
way.
birthday to Bob Pettit. And then
Yeah.
the two guys at the top who I genuinely do not know who I'm going to pick, and I will take feedback because I've decided between now and when this runs. Steph Curry, pretty good, and Kevin
Not
Durant,
bad.
also pretty good. I have no idea what to do.
Steph didn't have a bucket against the Grizzlies. I'd drop him.
That game was weeks ago, McMahon.
It was seared in my mind. I just told you that. That's a tough one. I'll say this. I think you'll get less hate if you put Steph number one, because certainly the fans.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. There'll be hate no matter what for that one.
Well, that's true. I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I mean, historically, not just right now. Right now, I probably would give the edge to KD. He has the luxury of being a 7-footer who's with that kind of skill set. Like
I think that's the edge I'm going to go to, because just the fact that he's a foot taller, and you've seen the impact he's had this year on Phoenix's team. I think we've talked about it. As of now, there's something like 14-2 when he plays, and they've been very bad when he doesn't. But I mean, I don't know. It's very hard to pick.
Historically, though, what a group when you include Russ, their all-time triple-doubles leader and MVP and all that. My God, that's a heck of a
Kevin
trip.
Love, Brook Lopez has had a heck of a career. I mean, that 2008 draft, it's awfully good.
So obviously, Curry is the greatest shooter ever to play, but I got to tell you that Durant is in the conversation. I mean, this guy
He's in the conversation for second.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
it's different kind of shoot. Durant is, I think if you ask guys, they'll say he's the greatest mid-range shooter ever.
Okay. Is that not a shooting?
Whereas Steph is the greatest three-point shooter and has expanded the way you think.
Steph's the greatest shooter of all time, and Durant is one of the guys you have to look at as the second best. And he's 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
He's one of the great scorers of all time. But
I think he's the greatest scorer of all time, personally.
Yeah, I mean, the way he elected to go with his career, he won 4 or 5 scoring titles in Oklahoma City. He could have kept winning them,
Yeah.
If you were going to create a player to score points in a basketball game, you would create Kevin Durant. He does everything excellently.
By the way, by the time he's done, he might be in the top 5 of all-time three-pointers made as well. Like
Yeah,
it's not like
top 5 scorers. And
missed a bunch of time with injury.
right.
Yeah. And you look at playoff scoring too, he's way up there.
For sure.
I would probably go with Durant, but I'm not sitting here feeling super strong about it.
Windy.
Yeah, this is the single this is the single toughest choice on the list. Trying to pick between those two guys.
I don't know what to, I mean, I one of my bugaboo topics that get me really going is when people try to degrade the titles that Durant won in Golden State as if he was not a huge part of that. I mean, the man
wasn't the Finals MVP.
He won the Finals MVP both years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that's a powerful comment on the.
Well, yeah. Honestly, the whole like KD legacy thing is ridiculous to me. It's like, listen, the guy's going to be a top 5 probably all-time scorer who's won 2 Finals MVP. Like the legacy, we can debate where he ranks among the top 10 or 12 best players of all time. Like, what are we talking about?
Right.
All right. Age 37 through 40. These are all easy. Bontemps, why don't you just go through them?
Yeah. So there's 3 players at 37 in the league. MacMahon, Fave, Joe Ingles, James Johnson. Both of them have played a combined 10 games this season. And the guy that I picked for basically by default, Mike Conley. Still an important piece for the
quality
Wolves.
choice though.
Hold on.
Yeah, well,
I'd like Conley better than Ingles. Conley's nice. Every time I see Joe, he's got something rude to say.
You know those Australians, they're famous for being surly.
Really?
There were 4 players at 38.
Hold on. James Johnson, though, is number 1 on the list of who do you not want to fight still in the whole league. I don't give a damn about age. Forget age, weight class, whatever.
That is true. There are 4 players at 38. Jeff Green and Garrett Temple, both playing bit roles for the Rockets.
2 of the greatest guys in the league.
Well,
right
yeah,
there.
hey, seriously, 2 awesome OG type of dudes. Markieff Morris is in that category as well. And DeAndre Jordan, I've had my tiffs with him, but the man has settled into a great OG role.
Yep. And then the 2 guys that I named in here, they also consider Kyle Lowry, who's off to a rough start, but is still playing a significant role for the Sixers as part of their very rough start to the season. And Al Horford, who obviously is headed to the Hall of Fame and played a huge role in Boston's championship run last year and is off to another impressive run this year, playing significant minutes for them with the Celtics. At 39, by the time this runs, there will be 2 players at 39. Taj Gibson, who is still bouncing around in the league, playing for Charlotte this year, and Chris Paul, the pick here, who is starting for the Spurs and helping Victor Wembanyama along.
Helping
and then
MacMahon get his dinner.
I am hungry, baby.
And then there's one player, and then there's one player at 40.
PJ Tucker's technically still in the league.
Oh, that's true.
He's technically on the Clippers roster.
He's still getting paid.
He hasn't played. That's right. He hasn't played a game. And then there's one player at 40. You guys can guess who it is.
I'd go with LeBron for 40.
Mr. James. All right. Thank you very much. Happy New Year to everybody. Thanks for listening to us throughout the year. Thank you to Rafa, our producer. Thank you to Jackson, who's taking a little time off. Thank you for watching and listening to the Hoop Collective podcast. Thank you to MacMahon and Bontemps, and we will talk to you next year.
Adios, amigos, and Happy New Year.